morning, everybody. We resume our partnership forum today with a special address by His Excellency Mr. Zanan Kasmao, former President of Timor-Leste.
Very sorry. Good morning to everybody. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to meet with you all here today. I'd like to start by thanking Mrs. Irene Khan, Director General of the International Development Law Organization, for inviting me to this conference. I want to acknowledge the presence of the distinguished participants who, since yesterday, brought to the Assembly important insights on the issue of sustaining peace, sustainable development, and the contribution of the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here representing a group of fragile in or post-conflict countries with the expectation that this forum can really explore the challenges and the opportunities faced by international and national actors to build peace and advance development. This global commitment conveys the needs and aspirations of humankind in a broad and true manner in order to ensure that people are at the center of our actions, both in developed as well as developing as well as developing countries. I believe everyone here is familiar with the lessons we have learned from the past, including from the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals. Indeed, the new agenda states that by 2030, no one should be left behind. Promoting the rule of law and ensuring equal access to justice for all in fragile and conflict-affected states are extremely complex tasks that are often poorly understood by international assistance. The justice sector is unequivocally a key sector for development. A fragile sector of justice may jeopardize the very state, as well as the economic and social development of the nation. While it is important that we provide the institutions of justice the appropriate and necessary support, we have to agree that this is an issue that must be addressed with the urgency and the seriousness that the human and humanitarian demands of justice requires from us, lest we risk a justice system that is inflexible or even without intention, one that neglects respect for the rights and the guarantees of victims and witnesses, as well as, importantly, the accused. Although Timor-Leste has relied on international assistance for these past 15 years, or maybe because of the way in which this international assistance was led, we must now invest more so that we may have an efficient justice system where cases are processed in a prompt, balanced, independent, and efficient manner. A thorough reform of the justice sector is still to be undertaken in Timor-Leste. This task will surely take years in view of its complexity and starting point position. I believe that this reform is very important. Indeed, while acknowledging the meritorious effort made by the Timorese magistracy to improve its operation, the fact is that there is a long way ahead of us in order to prevent perceptions of injustice which might undermine the very rule of law and the trust of citizens and investors. International cooperation through a process that is responsible, human, and inclusive, and owned by national decision makers will surely be part of the solution to this challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, it should be noted that the process for setting the ambitious 17 Sustainable Development Goals included inputs from fragile and conflict-affected states. This has allowed a more considered and effective approach to the various aspects of sustainable development and its challenges at the global level, as well as to the vital role that peace and stability play in achieving this development vision. The G7 Plus and the New Deal, which have been advocating the need for adopting proper peace-building and state-building processes, have enabled more collaborative actions to create a new development paradigm, as well as new forms of engagement in fragile and conflict-affected states. The difficulties experienced in these countries, which often include widespread and extreme poverty, requires cautious international intervention, in which all parties are both students and teachers, as we know that all situations and contexts are unique and therefore do not allow for a one-size-fits-all approach. We, the members of the G7 Plus group, are aware that our countries present very particular development challenges. As such, we have assumed the political commitment to adopt the 2030 Agenda, in which we advocate the inclusion of Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, since we know that without peace, justice, and sound and efficient institutions, it would be very hard for us to implement any of other 16 SDGs. We must acknowledge that our agenda will fail to achieve its goals if it does not start by improving the living conditions of the people in countries plagued by wars and conflict, particularly as we expect extreme poverty in 2030 to be concentrated in those countries. Giving back hope to men, women, and children who have been left behind in the progress of humanity is more than a moral duty. It is also a global responsibility and a matter of justice. Poverty and conflict are man-made. As such, I believe they can be stopped by all of us who share the values of freedom and human dignity. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, most of these conflicts have been going on for decades. The causes of most of them are well known. Most make us question ourselves about the values of humanity and civilization in a world that is supposed to be developed and technologically advanced. Today, we are so globally interconnected that an event in one part of the world may soon affect the lives of common citizens, institutions, and states in any other part of the world. The physical distance separating local from global events is often minimized by technology. Because of this, the wealth of a few clashes shamefully with the extreme poverty of many, leading to generalized feelings of revolt and intolerance. We cannot remain indifferent to the tragedy faced by some of the peoples of the world unless human solidarity is on the wane, and we all are becoming inured to the suffering of others. Such problems are the responsibility of us all, even if some of us are mirrored in our own internal problems. We cannot interfere in international matters only when we have national interests and strategies to defend. Ultimately, peace depends on every one of us through small decisions, actions, and initiatives that we can make and adopt in order to change the world. It is urgent that we understand that peace inside each of us depends upon peace between all of us, regardless of ethnicity, religion, ideology, or culture. We must work together as a community in order to find solutions to our common problems and to prevent tragedies and suffering now as well as in the future. We have endured 2 world wars and a period of Cold War. If we can learn something from our recent history and from the tragic consequences of this conflict, it is that we cannot put an end to war by waging war. We cannot stop violence with further violence. We cannot wash off blood with blood. We cannot repeat the errors of the past. We must face the causes of the problems, read the signs, and anticipate and foresee the future. Everyone should refuse to accept that one can talk about war, and we can see this on TV almost every day, from a perspective of defense or attack, while mechanisms of dialogue and diplomacy are still available to us, which might build tolerance and trust between countries, which might build peace. We already know the results of intervention that use force. They end up leading to even bloodier conflicts. We can see this in the Middle East, in Africa. We see tensions continue to rise until they even become nuclear threats. We witness ethnic rivalries, religious rivalries, and various types of extremism. We witness an increasing number of acts of terrorism, an increase in the number of refugees. A few days ago, not a few, they again, in the coast of Libya, who, instead of being celebrated for their sacrifice and for the courage they display in surviving, are instead shunned. And still we continue to be unable to find proper international solutions to problems that plague humankind. We are living in a world disorder that requires the rebuilding of the international system, a system that establishes long-term partnership between countries without hidden agendas and without taking advantages of the small and weak, just to defend their business and profits, but towards common goals of development and human dignity as the foundation for stability. The key questions in today's world are knowing how much longer major powers will continue promoting and funding wars and conflicts, and how much longer international organizations will continue to react to problems instead of trying to prevent them. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was unanimously approved by the 193 UN member states. Are these world leaders truly committed to goals seeking to make the world a better place? I'm speaking of fragile and conflict-affected states, which, by advocating the inclusion of the promotion of peace in this global agenda, have the moral obligation to do all they can so that their various institutions can manage development assistance effectively and transparently, and so that wealth is distributed fairly and equitable among their citizens. I'm also speaking of rich and developed countries that must make sure that the commitments that they make are more than short-term displays for public relations purpose. Within an intricate juggling of meetings and negotiations, where unconditional support to peace and sustainable development is declared in the morning, and $1 billion weapons sales deals are made in the afternoon. Nothing is impossible as long as the promotion of democracy and human rights replace the rhetoric exposed by the great powers, those proud pioneers of freedom and democracy, with pragmatic actions towards peace and the protection of collective interest, instead of the interests of a mighty few who pretend because it is to their benefit or to their business profits to be oblivious to the true causes of inequalities and injustice throughout the world. In a very recent conference in Perth, the chairman of BHP started to talk about looking at the local contents, make an appeal to the multinationals not to only suck money, but to look at the living conditions of the poor in the countries that they go. Thus, I say that there will not be sustainable development for all unless we all make a sustainable change in the way we engage with fragile and conflict-affected states. In order to do this, we must start by putting human dignity above any other political, economic, or strategic interest or consideration. We also must not impose patronizing values and presumptions as if seeking to civilize countries. In other words, we must replace an engagement model that is corrupted by interest with a true model of justice that promotes inclusive and sustainable development for all. If we want justice for all, we must free all peoples living in conflict. These countries did not achieve even a single Millennium Development Goal. They face insurmountable obstacles when trying to escape from a situation of fragility without the effective support of the international community. International assistance is essential to the sustainability of these nations. However, the approach adopted by development partners must be suitable to the real needs of these countries, and the engagement must be restricted to the specific circumstances and challenges of each nation. On the other hand, One cannot make the mistake of trying to solve the problems of these people, much less trying to impose solutions without their direct involvement. The experience in transitioning from conflict into stability in Timor-Leste through the UN transitional administration taught us that the only path, even if it is a painful one, is to search for the root causes of our problems within our societies. If we are part of the problem, we must necessarily be an even bigger part of the solution. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the G7 plus member countries are united by a common cause of peace building and state building, sharing their experiences with each other. We are monitoring closely the challenges faced by countries such as the Central African Republic, South Sudan, and Guinea-Bissau, and we want to promote a culture of solidarity under the banner of fragile to fragile cooperation. As a group, we congratulate the UN Secretary General for launching the agenda on sustaining peace and pledge our all support to the promotion of this important initiative. Although the G7 Plus is overall a relatively small group and weak countries, poor people, each of its members has direct experience in handling conflicts and violence. Unfortunately, some of these countries continue to live in the same troubled situations of conflict and violence, which is why we must have direct participation and added responsibility in contributing to build and maintain peace in each of these countries. Being home to around 400 million people, most of us have become a playground for regional and global politics, an experimental lab for peacekeeping, humanitarian aid and development approaches, and a breeding ground for multi-billion-dollar corporations seeking to exploit our resources. Some of us have been taking steps to escape the trap of permanent instability and conflict by making use of national mechanisms with wisdom and courage. We believe that our experience enables us to contribute so that the community of nations may achieve sustainable and lasting peace. This requires national leadership and ownership of decisions, programs and mechanisms, supported by flexible and efficient international intervention. Our commitment to promoting the G7 Plus is also based on our strong desire to share experiences, strengthen fragile to fragile cooperation, implement the SDGs, and naturally strive to live up to the motto, leave no one behind and reach the furthest behind first. It is firmly agreed by the G7 Plus that consolidating the sector of justice is of paramount importance for peace building and state building. It is also vital for conveying trust and attracting the necessary investment for developing the economy. We face several common challenges that include legal frameworks that are weak or inadequate to our realities, poor and limited infrastructure, and of course difficulties in capacity building and training of human resources. These are vital requirements for enabling access to justice for all. The justice sector is unequivocally a key sector for development. A fragile sector of justice may jeopardize the very state as well as the economic and social development of the nation. No one will invest in the economy if there is not a legal system ensuring that the law is upheld. And without investment, there is no employment. And without employment, there is no peace. This requires both sound cooperation with our development partners and a careful and inclusive internal process that involves not only government and public agencies, but also civil society and the community. Consequently, SDG 17, seeking to strengthen the means of implementation and to breathe new life into global partnership for sustainable development, splits up into several important goals that are valid instruments for the transformation we seek to achieve. In order to be successful, we must maintain a critical view of the process and make monitoring a key part to ensure we remain on the right track. In short, we want to see an actual impact on the lives of the people instead of mere statistical results. Consequently, we must at all times place people at the center of our actions. This is as valid for the partner that receives assistance as it is for the partner that provides it. Humanizing partnership is a vital precondition for everyone's success. Development partners on the ground must step out from their comfort zone. One cannot have their homework already prepared by copying what was done in other countries over the years. We need more creativity, more sensitivity to the specific intricacies of each mission, more consultation, and even more evidence-based decision-making, so that we may identify constraints and propose partnership solutions. Last but not least, we need time. Sustainable reforms, good practices, and strong institutions cannot be built in a day. Thank you very much for your patience.
I would like to thank President Shanana Guzmao for this inspiring statement on behalf of the group of G7+, which represents 20 conflict-afflicted countries that are seeking to move to sustain peace and also promote sustainable development. President Guzmao took time out from another conference here in Rome to be with us this morning. So thank you very much for this, and we look forward to a fruitful partnership between IDLO and the G7+. Thank you very much, sir. We will now move on with our Partnership Forum discussion on gender equality, which will be opened by the Minister for Women and Children's Affairs of Tunisia, Her Excellency, Madame Labidi. But we will just break for 2 minutes so that President Shanana can go on to his next meeting, and also Mr. Hochschild will also have to make his way back to New York. I would like to thank them both for the time that they have given us and for their support of IDLO. Thank you.
Grazie mille. Success. The humanity, the poor people in the world are expecting that you can do something for them. Thank you very much.
Okay, now it gives me great pleasure to open our discussion on gender equality and the rule of law with Her Excellency, Madame Neziha Labidi, who is the Minister for Women, Family and Childhood from Tunisia. We are very grateful that she made the time. In fact, came early to Rome to attend another meeting so that she could also participate in IDLO's proceedings. Tunisia is a very valued and valuable member party of IDLO. We have programs in Tunisia on women as well as on promotion, strengthening the justice system. And we hope to expand our partnership with your government, Madam. So allow me to introduce you. You are a politician and an activist with a long history of commitment to the struggle for rights and gender equality in Tunisia. You have been involved as a founding member of the NGO Women for School Canteen, a member that brought of the African Union Student Parents Network. You are a teacher by background and have been then the head of the Directorate of International Cooperation and External Relations at the Ministry of Women, Family and Childhood, and progressed from those positions to become a leading advocate for women and children. And you have numerous contributions. You have made numerous contributions at international and regional forums. And we are greatly honored to have you here this morning to say a few words before we launch into the discussion on gender equality and the rule of law. Madam, the floor is yours.
Bonjour, عسلامة من تونس. Cela veut dire en tunisien bonjour et bienvenue. Donc je suis Madame la Directrice Générale, très heureuse de faire partie de cette discussion. Et si je vous parle de moi, un dicton le dit, c'est que je vous parle de vous. Quand je parle de la Tunisie, un pays où j'ai eu la chance en tant que femme de naître dans un pays qui est 3 fois millénaire, dont la fondatrice de ce pays s'appelle Elissa, qui a fondé Carthage déjà très longtemps avant. Donc, c'est un honneur et une grande chance de naître dans un pays que j'appellerai le pays des droits humains des femmes par excellence. Je ne veux pas m'attarder sur l'histoire des femmes. Juste, je vais raconter l'histoire d'une grande princesse qui s'appelle Arwa, la Carouanaise. Déjà au IVe siècle, cette femme a institué la monogamie et donc a demandé à son époux de n'avoir aucune épouse, qu'elle est seule. Donc notre histoire est jalonnée de femmes qui ont porté des noms et qui ont marqué l'histoire. Juste pour rappeler également que la première femme avocate en Tunisie date de 1949, Madame Gisèle Halimi, qui par la suite est devenue une figure emblématique en matière de droits humains des femmes, et elle a fondé en 1972 le mouvement des libérations des femmes en France. J'étais toute jeune, j'étais élève en classe et je l'ai soutenue dans son parcours aux côtés de Madame Simone Veil pour la fameuse loi Veil. Donc il y a une longue histoire, et quand on parle de l'histoire, c'est quand même pour dire que la présence des femmes en Tunisie et la présence des femmes dans le monde est quelque chose d'exceptionnel et d'extraordinaire, et que partout dans le monde, il y a des femmes qui ont porté, qui ont hissé les droits humains de chacun, aussi bien de l'enfance, des personnes âgées, que de la femme, et également des humains d'une façon générale. Donc, que fait la Tunisie? Qu'a fait la Tunisie pour les droits humains des femmes? Donc, depuis déjà 1956, Feu Habib Bourguiba, premier président de la République tunisienne, a promulgué le Code du statut personnel. Dans ce code, il a réorganisé les relations entre la famille et a donné place à chacun dans le respect absolu des droits des uns et des autres. Donc, il a aboli la polygamie et, bien sûr, il a institué le droit à la scolarité obligatoire et gratuite pour les filles et les garçons, ce qui fait que actuellement nous avons une scolarité équitable entre les hommes et les femmes à raison de 99,9% pour les filles et les garçons dans n'importe quelle région de la Tunisie, au fin fond de la campagne et dans les régions rurales. En 1993 est également une date très importante parce que l'article 23 ancien stipulait que les femmes devaient obéissance à leur époux, qu'elle soit médecin, qu'elle soit professeur, elle doit obéir absolument à son mari. Donc on a remplacé l'obéissance par le respect mutuel. Et donc, vous voyez, c'est une révolution pour un pays arabo-musulman, mais cette révolution dans les mentalités ne va pas s'arrêter, elle continue. C'est un processus auquel nous croyons et c'est une vision à laquelle nous tenons. Et pour cela, nous mettons en place les stratégies, les activités pour nous mener vers plus et davantage d'équité et de parité entre hommes et femmes, sans vraiment avoir ce conflit entre les hommes et les femmes. Parce que nous considérons en Tunisie que pour réussir notre projet d'équité et de stabilité, nous devons être ensemble, et lui et elle, pour développer le pays en dehors de tout conflit. Et donc, vous savez très bien que la Tunisie, en 2011, a connu ce qu'on appelle une révolution. Cette révolution a permis d'abord la liberté d'expression, la liberté de penser. Et donc cette liberté acquise, cette nouvelle démocratie, nous a amenés vers une nouvelle constitution. Et donc la nouvelle constitution, si je peux dire sans la moindre prétention, quel est le fruit de combats de femmes, parce qu'en 2013, il y a eu quand même un petit tremblement de terre. Et nous, les femmes, on avait peur, et les hommes aussi, il faut le dire, que les droits acquis des femmes tunisiennes allaient connaître un retour vraiment en arrière. Mais nous étions là, très vigilantes, et nous avons veillé, et nous avons dit non, absolument non, nous ne reviendrons jamais 3 ou 4 siècles en arrière. Ce qui est acquis dans nos mentalités, dans notre éducation, hommes et femmes. Donc on a dit non, et c'est ainsi que la Constitution de 2014 a contenu un article, l'article 21 et surtout l'article 46, qui soulignait l'importance et la responsabilité de l'État de protéger et de faire avancer les droits humains des femmes. Donc, ce processus continue. Et aujourd'hui, il y a aussi d'autres articles qui viennent consolider cela. C'est la parité et l'égalité entre hommes et femmes en matière d'élection. Donc, la parité verticale et horizontale. Et donc, tous les partis sont obligés de présenter des listes électorales contenant le nombre égal d'hommes et de femmes. Ce processus, je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, continue. Et vous avez entendu que, à l'occasion de la journée nationale des femmes tunisiennes le 13 août, parce que j'ai dit tout à l'heure que nous avons la chance d'être tunisiennes, parce que nous fêtons 2 événements. La journée internationale des femmes le 8 mars, et je salue toutes les femmes du monde pour leur dire « Soyons ensemble, soyons vigilantes, travaillons ensemble pour faire évoluer nos droits, demander la parité, demander surtout l'équité pour pouvoir vivre dignement, pour assurer notre vie, notre survie et assurer également une vie sereine, belle, avec beaucoup de paix pour les générations futures. C'est notre responsabilité aujourd'hui et nous devons transmettre pour les générations futures nos sentiments, notre travail, notre perception des droits humains. Donc, le président de la République, M. Beji Caïd Sipsi, a demandé que l'article 73, la circulaire de 1973 qui stipulait que les femmes tunisiennes ne pouvaient pas se marier avec un non-musulman. Donc maintenant, la femme tunisienne est libre de choisir son partenaire sans la moindre contrainte. Et là, c'est une forme de liberté individuelle qui est consacrée par la haute sphère politique. D'autre part, le débat est ouvert et c'est une première dans le monde arabe. Nous assumons notre responsabilité. Nous sommes déterminés vers la parité, l'égalité. Et donc, le débat est ouvert autour de l'égalité en matière d'héritage. Vous voyez que la Tunisie, malgré sa position, et il y a 2 semaines, un mois, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, nous étions à Palerme et je remercie beaucoup la voix de Monsieur le ministre des Affaires étrangères disait que la Tunisie est un joyau, le joyau de la Méditerranée. C'est un éloge, d'accord, mais c'est une responsabilité, parce que quand on est un joyau, on doit briller et faire briller les choses autour de soi. Donc c'est pour cela que la Tunisie se charge et également a cette responsabilité de demeurer toujours un pays précurseur, un pays qui pousse vers l'avant. Quand vous regardez la géographie de la Tunisie, vous voyez une main tendue. Cette main tendue, c'est une main d'amitié, d'amour et aussi de solidarité envers les 2 rives de la Méditerranée. Et donc, la Tunisie a beaucoup de plans et je voudrais souligner quelques-uns, si vous me permettez, parce que je sais qu'on ne doit pas dépasser beaucoup de temps. Il est important de souligner que la Tunisie est le 19e pays au monde à avoir adopté une loi intégrale contre la violence faite aux femmes. Toutes les formes de violence faites aux femmes, la violence physique, morale, économique, politique. Et également, nous avons élevé l'âge de la maturité sexuelle de 13 ans vers 16 ans. Et nous ne sommes pas tout à fait satisfaits parce que pour nous, l'enfance, c'est l'âge, va jusqu'à l'âge de 18 ans. Et vous savez que le violeur, maintenant, dans cette loi, il ne peut plus être impuni par le mariage. C'est fini. Les femmes en Tunisie et les femmes dans le monde ne peuvent plus être violées tout au long de leur vie, une première fois et tout au long de leur vie. Nous devons veiller à ce que les femmes restent dignes, soient fortes. Et c'est là la détermination des femmes. Et quand je dis la femme tunisienne, je parle au nom de toutes les femmes, parce que d'abord, moi je suis un être humain, avant de porter une nationalité, de parler une langue. C'est pour cela que je considère que quand une larme coule de l'œil d'une femme ou d'un homme, elle ne porte aucune nationalité, elle n'a aucune religion, elle exprime une émotion, elle exprime un mal, elle exprime quelque chose que l'autre voit et il ne peut porter de jugement contre cela. Donc, pour mettre en place cette loi, nous avons mis en place le Conseil des pairs. C'est un conseil pour la parité et l'égalité entre hommes et femmes, présidé par Monsieur le chef du gouvernement. Il est organisé avec tous les hauts responsables, femmes et hommes, des institutions. Et donc, nous veillons à la mise en place de ce mécanisme. Et nous nous sommes rendus compte que ce n'est pas suffisant. Donc, nous venons de créer un prix, un palmarès que nous accorderons à toute institution, à toute organisation qui met en place et qui garantit la parité hommes et femmes dans les postes de prise de décision. Là, vraiment, c'est quelque chose de... Ce sont des expériences, si vous voulez, très réduite et j'attends vos questions parce qu'il y a beaucoup de choses à dire. Et surtout, j'aimerais vous écouter avec beaucoup d'amitié et beaucoup de sérénité parce que c'est ça le plus important, c'est cet échange, c'est ce dialogue qui va renforcer l'amitié et qui va renforcer notre travail et notre devenir. Merci.
I would like to thank Her Excellency Minister Labidi for her very inspiring opening words, which sets a good scene for our discussion. I would also like to mention here how much we appreciate, Madam, the cooperation we enjoy with your ministry. And we feel very privileged and honored to be able to contribute to a very impressive and ambitious legislative agenda that you have put together for your ministry to improve the situation of women and children in your country and the leadership role I think that you are playing in the region. So we are very grateful for your presence here and also for the opportunity to work with you. May I now open our panel by saying that the report of the World Economic Forum this year says that being a woman has actually got worse in 2017. The World Economic Forum has been producing a report every year for the last 11 years, which they call the Gender Gap Report, to show how differences between men and women are closing over the years. For the first time since they started this report, the gap has actually grown. According to the first report they had produced 11 years ago, they said that it would take 100 years for men and women to achieve parity in health, education, political empowerment, and economic participation. They had said 83 years. 83 years. And this year they said it will take 100 years. So in fact, it seems the differences are growing. That is, of course, not good news if you are a woman. On the other hand, we need to move from global analysis to what is actually happening in each country at the national level. And there we see a difference. And we see good news. For instance, in Kenya, the Institute of Management has produced a report on inclusion which shows that it has actually improved from 12% to 18%. So there are encouraging stories as well. And I hope that in our panel today, of course we will talk about the problems, but let's also talk about the progress and the solutions, because that is what inspires us to do more and better. So let me start first with Mr. Arkel Benitez, who is the Secretary General of the Conference of Ministers of Justice of the Ibero-American countries. These are 21 Latin American states and the Iberian Peninsula. And he is also the former Deputy Minister of Guatemala. Mr. Benitez, the question I would like to ask you is that according to a recent report of UNDP and UN Women, Latin America and the Caribbean is the most violent region in the world for women outside the conflict countries. What steps are being taken in those countries to discard that terrible image that they have of violence against women and girls, and not just the image, but to change the reality? What is being done?
Muy buenos días, señora Irene Khan, directora general de IDLO, a todas las delegaciones, muy buen día. Para nosotros es un verdadero honor poder participar en esta asamblea general de un organismo tan importante con una proyección tan global. La pregunta es una pregunta compleja porque no se responde en pocos minutos. Es una pregunta muy importante y creo que inteligentemente provocadora para hablar no solo de los factores endógenos, sino los factores exógenos que gravitan alrededor de una zona golpeada por muchos aspectos que tienen que ver como, por ejemplo, el narcotráfico, el tráfico de armas y todas las tipologías delictivas que hay alrededor del gran problema del narcotráfico. El tema no es menor, hay diversas situaciones que complican ese panorama y sin embargo yo creo que hay pasos significativos que la región viene dando para poder reaccionar frente a una situación complicada que se vive particularmente en el segmento de las niñas y de las mujeres. Hemos visto cómo el crimen organizado transnacional ha instrumentalizado a las adolescentes, a las mujeres en la región. Es una preocupación constante. Hemos visto factores de riesgo muy complejos, como por ejemplo aquellos que tienen que ver con la niñez migrante no acompañada hacia los Estados Unidos, particularmente la que proviene o procede del Triángulo Norte, ahora llamado Triángulo Norte de la región centroamericana, Honduras, El Salvador y Guatemala. Sin embargo, hemos visto cómo los países han asumido con mucha responsabilidad estos problemas. Hemos visto un diálogo permanente al más alto nivel entre los presidentes de ese Triángulo Norte, por poner un ejemplo, con México y con Estados Unidos, tratando de buscar una solución. Por ejemplo, la Alianza para la Prosperidad es una de ellas. Es una iniciativa que precisamente trata de contrarrestar ese tipo de situaciones que tienen que ver con los riesgos que pueden sufrir las niñas en el momento de decidir buscar una reunificación familiar con sus parientes, buscar oportunidades que no hay de desarrollo en la región. Hemos visto también, y como bien lo decía la directora, queremos escuchar cosas alentadoras. Hemos visto cómo la región está articulando y mejorando su Estado de Derecho alrededor de la protección hacia la mujer. Hemos visto cómo algunos países han avanzado en su legislación, otros han llegado incluso a crear tribunales especializados en violencia de género. Guatemala fue un paso más allá, por ejemplo, y creó tribunales y una jurisdicción para contrarrestar el delito de femicidio, que es una situación grave y execrable en la región. Y hemos podido ver cómo hay avances, digamos, en la organización regional para hacer frente a esta problemática. En el marco del Sistema de Integración Centroamericana se desarrolló una estrategia de seguridad democrática para la región, en donde hay un componente fuerte también para la prevención de la violencia, específicamente con enfoque de género hacia la mujer. Nosotros desde la Conferencia de Ministros de Justicia de los países iberoamericanos hemos venido analizando el tema con bastante atención y recientemente creamos por primera vez el Comité de Género de nuestra organización, el cual está presidido por la ministra de Justicia de Costa Rica y la ministra de Justicia de Cuba. Ya tuvimos una primera reunión, no habíamos abordado este tema de manera tan puntual como lo estamos empezando a abordar ahora, y seguramente esto va a generar políticas específicas hacia este sector tan importante y obviamente generar condiciones que permitan oportunidades en igualdad de condiciones. Quisiera decirles también que en este contexto ha habido algunos avances significativos también a nivel de toda la región. Nosotros de lo iberoamericano, de lo regional, estamos tratando de avanzar hacia un nivel más global. Nuestra organización en 2016 adquirió el estatuto de observadora permanente de la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas. En nuestra reciente asamblea en Ecuador, en Quito, alineamos nuestra estrategia de trabajo hacia el ODS 16 de la Agenda 2030 y con ello vamos a tener una relación más directa y más global con otros países. Recientemente suscribimos también un convenio con la Conferencia de Ministros de Justicia de Lengua Oficial Portuguesa. Precisamente lo firmamos con el Ministro de Justicia de Timor-Leste recientemente en Lisboa y creemos que la región tiene buenas prácticas y buenos ejemplos. Aún y cuando vemos situaciones complejas, vemos cómo algunos países están bajando en sus tasas de homicidio, están logrando reducir la violencia en términos generales, lo cual incluye también a las niñas y a las mujeres. Y yo creo que esto también va a ir generando un mejor esquema de bienestar. Yo me decantaría, si tuviera que explicar y que poner el ejemplo de un país que ha logrado mejorar muchísimo en el tema de equidad de género, en materia de justicia. Ya lo hablaban acerca de la horizontalidad y la verticalidad. Yo quisiera poner, por ejemplo, el caso de Nicaragua. En Nicaragua hay que preguntarse qué mujer no lidera un poder público relacionado con la justicia. Hay una vicepresidenta mujer, la fiscal general es mujer, la ministra de Gobernación es mujer, la presidenta de la Corte Suprema de Justicia es mujer, la magistrada delegada ante la Corte Centroamericana de Justicia es mujer, la directora de la Policía Nacional de Nicaragua es mujer con una trayectoria de 20 años y ahí vemos los resultados de toda una estrategia de protección social que está dando resultados. Entonces, sí creemos que hay algunas buenas prácticas en esa región, catalogada lamentablemente por ser una región que los números están ahí, no los podemos esconder, una región que ha tenido una historia reciente de violencia, pero que también es una región que viene saliendo de una etapa de conflictos armados internos. Hace apenas 20, 25 años que se terminó el conflicto armado interno en regiones como El Salvador y Guatemala, y creo yo que son, digamos, pasos importantes que la región tiene que tratar, en la que la región tiene que tratar de avanzar. Yo celebro recientemente nuestra suscripción de un convenio con el secretario general del Sistema de Integración Centroamericana, que tiene una visión ahora no solo hacia lo social, sino una visión también a generar más oportunidades de desarrollo que tienen que ver con la mejora de la seguridad jurídica, la mejora de la infraestructura para generar y atraer mayores inversiones y eso pueda generar desarrollo y oportunidades de trabajo en la región, y eso obviamente tendrá un componente de equidad de género que debe ser ineludible y que tiene que estar presente en la región. Es una región de contrastes, una región de luces y de sombras, pero nos alienta a saber que aquellas luces son lo suficientemente amplias y tienen la capacidad de iluminar el camino para entender que podemos avanzar mucho más en esa región. Finalmente, porque sé que mi intervención es únicamente en este espacio, yo quisiera reiterar a las delegaciones, a la Asamblea General, a la Directora General, el enorme interés de nuestra conferencia por adquirir algún estatus especial que nos permita tener una relación mucho más directa y cooperativa con IDLO. Somos una organización que no solamente estamos dedicados a la asistencia, a la cooperación al desarrollo específicamente para fortalecer a los ministerios de justicia y a la justicia en la región. Somos una organización que también adopta tratados internacionales de carácter jurídico. Somos una organización que promueve y genera cooperación jurídica internacional. En mi condición de secretario general también tengo la condición de secretario general de la Red Iberoamericana de Cooperación Jurídica Internacional, que reúne a todos los fiscales, a todos los presidentes de las Cortes Supremas de Justicia de Iberoamérica, y eso nos da un campo de relacionamiento mucho más amplio. En esa línea, en esa tesitura, ratificar una reciente comunicación que tuvimos hacia la directora general en el sentido de que nos gustaría explorar la posibilidad de tener un estatuto mucho más cercano y directo a IDLO, desde la lógica que lo hablaba el propio presidente, expresidente de Timor-Leste. Creo que los tiempos del multilateralismo nos orientan a replantearnos estrategias comunes, y creo que en el objetivo número 16 de la Agenda 2030 podemos encontrar ese punto en común que nos permita seguir avanzando. De un tiempo acá, básicamente desde que tomé posesión del cargo, nos hemos planteado que nuestras actividades deben de tener una orientación global. Con esto termino. Estamos ahora en una fase de negociación de un tratado denominado Tratado para la Transmisión Electrónica de Solicitudes de Cooperación Jurídica Internacional entre autoridades centrales, lo que implicaría darle validez automática a las comunicaciones que transitan en nuestra plataforma. Esto es dar un salto cualitativo y tenemos ya un consenso técnico para poder firmar ese convenio, este tratado en el corto plazo. Y uno de los elementos significativos de este tratado es que no solo va a quedar para la comunidad iberoamericana, sino que estamos buscando que el documento admita que estados extrarregionales puedan ser parte de este tratado. Así que nuestra visión es un poco más global, digamos, de lo que veníamos haciendo, y en efecto pues van a estar representadas todas las expresiones que tienen que ver con la tutela jurídica, y no descartamos obviamente y no renunciamos y no hemos quitado el dedo del renglón por seguir apoyando todos los procesos que tengan que ver con una efectiva igualdad de género. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benitez, for your response. My question was deliberately provocative, but you gave a good answer of the important measures that are being taken in the region to address the issue of gender-based violence. As you know, we ourselves have a program in Honduras where we are addressing violence against women and violence in families. And of course, we are just about to launch a very big program in Mexico on police capacity building at local, state, and federal level, which I hope we will also have a component to seek to make the police forces much more sensitive to gender-based violence issues. So there is room for great cooperation between us and the region, as well as your institution, and we look forward to taking that forward. So thank you very much, Mr. Benitez. Now, let me before I turn to the other speakers on the panel, I would like to invite the ambassador of Ukraine to say a few words. I was very surprised and impressed earlier last week when I went to visit him and to talk about my visit to Ukraine. And I asked him whether he would like to talk about the institution building work that's happening there. And he said no. He actually wanted to make a contribution on the gender panel. And I was really honored, and I felt really honored and privileged that he was taking the lead on this issue. It is a country where there are very interesting things happening on gender equality. We are supporting the development through the Ministry of Interior of networks to address the issue of domestic violence and also the issue of trafficking. So it is a great pleasure and honor, sir, to give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. First of all, I can hardly compete with the previous distinguished speakers, but nevertheless, I would like to thank the Secretary General of Hispano-America Conference because I was posted in 2 of the mentioned countries 26 years ago. I remember the situation with gender equality in these countries like it was 30 years, and now I am very happy that he presented the progress achieved by these countries after the 25 years. Also, the time is pressing, and that is why I would like to draw your attention to one issue because our partnership forum has a title and a topic of this forum, Peace and Gender Equality. The peace is the most desirable word in my country now, and I would like to draw your attention to one issue, question, maybe phenomenon. It's a growing number of women in military service in my country. I would like to tell you that only this year 2,400 women were contracted to the Ukrainian army. Currently, in Ukrainian army we have 55,000 women. It's an average of a European army. And I would like to draw your attention to this issue because we have to create a legal basis for this military service. We have to create a legal basis for volunteer movement in Ukraine, where the biggest part are women. And we have to create conditions for post-conflict, post-war rehabilitation of women who served in the army. That is why I think that IDLO can develop this issue in the future. And very short story, because I was asked to speak informally also. I would like to tell you a short story from my own diplomatic experience. Ministry of Foreign Affairs of one European country was conducting meetings, events, cultural visits for ambassadors accredited based in this capital. And this Ministry of Foreign Affairs was organizing events for whole ambassadors or sometimes for ambassadors women. One time I asked the protocol department of this ministry whether we can expect that Ministry of Foreign Affairs will organize an event for ambassadors men. And the answer was that once the group of ambassadors men will be in minority, we are ready to organize. This is a diplomatic contribution to gender equality issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for raising, I think, two interesting perspectives. When will we see a minority of men in diplomacy? But also drawing attention to a real problem and an opportunity. It is an opportunity that women play an equal part in the military, but there are, of course, policies and guidelines and that need to be developed to handle that properly, and also the issue of rehabilitation of women. I think you raised a very important point, which is valid not only for Ukraine, but for many other countries that are going through conflict situations, and sometimes informal militia also in a number of countries have women involved. We know that. So thank you for addressing, drawing our attention to it, and certainly we will look into that with interest from IDLO's perspective. I think our gender panel has begun very well with a very balanced approach where we've had two men actually speaking now. We also have two women on the panel, and I wanted to give them an opportunity and one after the other, and then we will open it up for a wider discussion from the floor. The next panelist is Marianne Birkin. She is the General Counsel of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and incidentally, we have a new program partnered by, where we are partnering with EBRD in Ukraine. But we are also partnering with EBRD in a number of countries. We have been doing so for a number of years now, but this year in particular, with a framework agreement that I mentioned yesterday, our partnership has indeed expanded, both in terms of the volume of work, but I think also in terms of the quality of our partnership, where we are moving towards a genuine partnership of sharing experiences, of working on policy issues, and of course, pursuing our mutual goals of strengthening capacity of countries, legal and judicial capacity of countries to advance economic development. And I'm going to ask Marianne Birkin, who has an extensive and impressive international career, both in the intergovernmental sector and in the private sector. So, of course, coming from this rich experience and background, tell me, or tell us, all of us, EBRD's approach to gender and how the EBRD is actually, what it has found in this area and what it plans to do about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this kind introduction. It's really a privilege to be here, again and speak, and with such inspiring speakers speaking before me. It was really great to hear the positive news from Tunisia and sort of the Latin American region. Also, actually, it's interesting here. I was looking around to see we have such great diversity in this audience, which throughout my career has been very different. It's good to hear from the Indian ambassador, this question about when do men get together, when they're the minority. I've been in many meetings and conferences where I was one of very few women. I think that very few men have experienced a situation where they were the only men in the room. So we still have a long way to go, and I'll tell you a little bit about what EBRD is doing, but also some of the projects we're actually doing together with IDLO, because in fact we have deepened our partnership this year, and we are doing some very, very exciting work. So I speak very much from when I talk about EBRD's work from the private sector perspective, because that is the focus of our works. We focus on private sector development, and it's very clear that there are still persisting gender inequalities in the region in which we operate. There's lower participation rate in the labor force of women. There are difficulties, women face difficulties in obtaining loans, even opening bank accounts in many places. Women are underrepresented in decision making. So it is still true that the gap is there, and it's disappointing to see that the gap is actually not narrowing as much as we want to overall. So we issued a gender strategy in 2015. So this is for the period of 2016 to 2020, and after that we are planning to sort of mainstream our gender work, which is currently not the case. But 3 objectives really come out of that gender strategy. And so we're looking at increasing access to finance and business support for women-led businesses. We're also looking at increased access to skills and employment for women, and increased access to services. And as I had sort of mentioned also yesterday, the way we approach this work is we do it through investments mainly in private sector, some in public sector, but also our policy dialogue with the countries in which we work. Some examples of operations is that we have dedicated credit lines for women-led businesses. We sometimes put covenants in our loan agreements requiring our clients to improve gender balance in their staff, for example. We also have a very active Women in Business program where we're looking at supporting entrepreneurs with sort of running and growing their businesses. And as we also heard yesterday, women very much are involved in many regions in SMEs, in smaller businesses, and so they need particularly support. So from a policy objective, what we are really wanting to do is create an enabling environment to support women entrepreneurs overall. And one area we are looking at from a legal reform point of view is sort of how we can do this by increasing access to justice. So we're working with IDLO in a project in Jordan and Egypt. The project at EBRD is led by Kim O'Sullivan, who's sitting here in the audience. And so she actually just came back from a trip last week, very excited, telling me about the first work that was being done with IDLO colleagues. The project's objectives are to understand the difficulties that are faced by women entrepreneurs in terms of access to justice in the context of commercial disputes. And some research has been done, and it tells us that the cost of enforcing contracts is actually higher for women. It takes longer for women to resolve disputes. There are often barriers to going to court because of a lack of understanding that women have in how the processes work. And then we have sort of also issues of biased decision making. But it's even things that actually sort of little anecdotes that Kim told me about. Well, you know, women often when they run their businesses, they also run the family, they also have kids. And, you know, and going to court and meeting court dates isn't, you know, easy to plan in. So simple things like this. There's definitely, I think we found there's lots of issues, but we need to understand more about those. So the project is trying to create a really better understanding and an awareness of what the barriers are to create a gender-responsive commercial environment. So we've just started a project, so a lot of work needs to be done. But I'm really excited that we have this project, that we are looking at this more deeply. We're trying to get research, and hopefully we will find out what action can be taken and what support we can give. And this project is in Jordan and in Egypt, but once we have done these projects in one country, we can roll them out elsewhere as well. We're also organizing with the IDLO a Women Judges Forum in Morocco. This is next year, which is also, I think, very exciting sort of project. So there we bringing together women judges to discuss and exchange knowledge and experience on the barriers that they are facing as women judges. In how they can be more effective in participating and being leaders in the justice sector. So we are going to look at areas where the influence of women judges can make a difference, and so try to build a regional platform for judges to discuss and refine sort of these issues and create a vision, creating objectives and action plan towards really getting a better position of women in the judiciary. It's interesting actually how so much is done through networking of women when it comes to the business. I work in the City of London, and there are so many events where women getting together, leaders are getting together to sort of support development of women. And in the judicial sector, in the justice sector, that networking doesn't seem to be there as much. And I think still more work needs to be done, and this is a fantastic opportunity to get women together and see what progress can be made. I just want to say a few things about a study also that we have done about sort of women on board. So we looked actually at gender diversity on boards in the context of our corporate governance work. So we did a very extensive corporate governance assessment in 2016, where we looked at legislation and practices, disclosed practices of the 10 largest listed companies in each of the countries that we work. So we looked at 34 countries, and we divided our analysis in 5 sections. We looked at the structure and the functioning of the board. We looked at transparency and disclosure, internal control, rights of shareholders and stakeholders and institutions. And the one sort of area where I just want to talk about briefly is the area of structure and functioning of the board, where we looked at gender diversity on boards. So these were the 10 largest listed companies in each of our countries. So we gave them ratings. We gave ratings where if the gender diversity is less than 10%, the country is very weak. If it's more than 25%, that we would consider the country very strong on gender diversity. And sure enough, no country that we looked at had any gender diversity on the board where more than 25% were women. In fact, most of the countries, 19, were very weak, meaning they had gender women on their boards of less than 10%. On average, the countries had a gender diversity for 10%, so 10% of women. EBRD countries in the EU, 13%, and in the MENA region, actually was very weak with 6.3%. So very, very disappointing results. The highest gender diversity on boards was in Slovenia with 23.3%, and the lowest actually in Belarus and Mongolia with only 3.3%. So this is an area where we need to do a lot of work. I've been speaking about this at some other events recently, and I think a lot of study is being done now on the economic impact of gender diversity. And it's interesting. I mean, this is not true just for women on boards, but just generally on decision making. When you have a more diverse decision-making body, you get better decisions. And similarly now, there is a lot of study that shows that in companies where you have a more diverse board and you have more women on the board, there are higher returns on equity. There is a study that suggests that women are actually better at risk-taking. Some companies have higher share prices. So now the economic impact is shown. It's rather sad that we needed that to kind of get going. Because of course having a gender equality is just the right thing to do. But now I think there is really a momentum building where even in the private sector, or just in the private sector almost more than on the public sector, companies are pushing this agenda. Private equity firms are looking at this and not investing or pushing their investee companies to have better equality on the board. We have also a lot of now studies on the impact of groupthink. How if you have a board with, which you often see in the UK, for example, with white men in their 50s who've all been CEOs of a company before. I mean, that's not very diverse, and you don't get the same challenge from that group as when you have people from different backgrounds, coming from different industries, different gender, different ethnic origin, and so on. So I think this is really something that now has a lot of attention. There is discussion about quota systems, for example, and so it would be maybe interesting to have some discussion about this. So a lot of work being done, a lot of work still to be done, working very extensively with IDLO, and maybe next year we can report some of our successes as well.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for your contribution, which shows both what you're doing with business and also what you're doing particularly with women entrepreneurs themselves, both sides trying to encourage and strengthen, advance gender equality. And I wanted to mention that the region, of course, has expanded for EBRD, and that means that our partnership actually extends now from something like Mongolia to Morocco. So that's an expansive region, and we greatly appreciate the excellent cooperation we enjoy with you. My next speaker is also coming from a partner organization with whom we have a memorandum of understanding and very successful new programs emerging. An organization, and I'm talking now of UNAIDS, whose leadership has been particularly open, cooperative, and has been an inspiration, I think, in promoting the issue of women and girls. UNAIDS, of course, is known for the work that it has done, multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral approach to HIV/AIDS. But it is also an organization that is, I would say, an organization for social justice. And our speaker today is Luisa Cabal. She's the Special Advisor for Human Rights and Gender, and we work very closely with UNAIDS in developing programs on the ground. But I hope Luisa will also say a few words about how this particular issue is affecting, it is of course affecting women and girls, but where do you see the gaps in the rule of law as an enabler and guarantor of access to healthcare for women? And do you think there has been sufficient progress? The key question for us always is, what are the key challenges out there and how do we tackle them? So looking forward to your presentation, Louisa. And in the interest of time, if we could keep it around 5 or 6 minutes, we can then open it up for a few questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Director General, and thank you to you and all the staff at IDLO with whom we partner. You asked me to discuss some gaps, and I just want to focus on 2 blind spots based on my experience on gender, health, and the law. I believe that without tackling these 2 blind spots, we won't be able to keep up with the promise of the SDG 2030 agenda of putting rule of law as central to development. And so let me first make, my first point is that we need to make sure that the rule of law discussions are happening in other corridors, not just in the corridors where with ministers of justice or but we need to make sure that these conversations are happening, whether it's in the ministers of health, in the ministers of education, in other corridors where development discussions are happening. And I'll give the example of health and HIV. And don't get me wrong, we've done a lot to ensure that we make progress on HIV, but unfortunately, missing out or not fully owning the discussions around rule of law in the HIV agenda have meant that we're not where we want to be in terms of social justice and access to treatment. And let me illustrate this. In fact, as Irene mentioned, we've made great progress in ensuring that more people are on treatment. From around 37 million people living currently with HIV, around 21 million have access to treatment. And this is quite impressive. However, women and girls keep lagging behind. And globally, adolescent girls and young women account for approximately, and please listen to this, almost 7,000 new infections every week. And in sub-Saharan Africa, 3 in 4 of these new infections were among girls. And so we might say that we're failing these women and girls by not providing enough access to treatment. But the story, or not doing enough on prevention, but the story behind it is also a story around gaps in the rule of law. And gaps and not doing enough to eliminate the discrimination in law, in policies, in regulations that don't allow these women and girls to feel empowered, to have an enabling social, cultural, and legal environment that will allow them to protect themselves. How is this manifested in laws, regulations, or policies, you might ask? One is the fact that only 1 in 3 young women have access to the information they need to protect themselves. And unfortunately, it's the laws and the policies and regulations that are acting, in many cases, as the barriers for these young women to have access to this information and this education. They also cannot access HIV testing or much needed sexual and reproductive health services in many cases for regulations that require parental consent. So they're also finding very late, for example, that they have HIV. So this is to say we need these conversations around rule of law and to double our efforts to eliminate discriminatory laws and policies, but also ensure that these young women and girls have access to justice when violations occur. And there are numerous gaps around that I'll be happy to discuss. A final reflection on this issue. There has been such a gap in the understanding that, in fact, rule of law is a determinant of health, that the Lancet just recently, only a few years ago, put together a Lancet Commission on Global Health and the Law, precisely to discuss the centrality of rule of law in advancing health and advancing gender equality within health. So this is an invitation to think, how else is it that we carry these conversations into those corridors? And the second blind spot that I think we've discussed in this past 2 days is, and I couldn't put it in a better way than Michelle Bachelet, the president of Chile and former executive director of UN Women, who said, yeah, we need to ensure that rule of law advances gender equality because rule of law often rules women out. And again, the SDG agenda, women's rights treaties, have this as a centrality to the agenda. But we need to walk the walk and stop talking the talk. And let me give you an example based on my own career on this. When we were discussing, I used to be an international human rights litigator, and in many of the settlements I would be discussing in front of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights or in discussion with other bodies, the discussion was, hold on 1 minute, your country just came out of a conflict. Shouldn't your women's rights issues, your women's health issues, wait until we've solved all of these more important issues? And what I found time and time again is the discussions about women's health, women's rights, gender equality, get at the bottom of the agenda because there are more important things that we need to get done. So my invitation also to this room is, how do we, each one of us, in every conversation around rule of law, make gender equality central to those discussions? And I want to share a good practice, which I don't know, which has come to Rome, which is, I don't know if people have heard about the Gender Champions Initiative. We make sure that top-level officials in every institution commit to do a gender pledge. And one of the pledges had been around gender parity in panels. And what that has meant is that many men have committed themselves to ensuring that no panel where there are no women will be accepted by their offices. And this has transformed the way in which discussions are happening in corridors around New York or Geneva. So why don't we do the same to ensure that in our discussions around rule of law, we're always asking the question around gender equality? Finally, what can be done? And I think that what we need to do is more of what we know works, right? We need to engage and provide technical assistance to the judiciary, to the executive, work with parliaments. But we also need to follow up with innovations on two fronts. One, that was mentioned by Marianne, in terms of how do we enable those connections to happen, whether it's women entrepreneurs, women academics, academics working around rule of law and gender. How do we make sure that we support innovations on legal education? And to end, this is what we're precisely doing in partnership with IDLO. We're trying to make sure that legal education in some of the countries that we're working is permeated of how are we creating a culture, a new culture of understanding of rule of law and gender equality and access to justice for those most marginalized, so that the new students and the leaders of tomorrow are actually trained in understanding the centrality of rule of law and concepts of human protection of human rights as central to development and peaceful and inclusive societies. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Luisa, for in a very short time, you actually packed in a lot to tell us how women's access to health, women's protection, women and girls' protection from HIV infection is so closely linked to issues of social development, to issues of women's political and legal empowerment, and the law has to play a role in it. And I would say flip around the issue. It's not about peace being up there and women's agenda being down there and therefore having to be brought up, but I think we need to change the mindset for people to recognize that you can have no peace without women and girls. Peace is for people, and if half your population is forgotten and left behind, you're not going to have peaceful societies. And we see that again and again around the world. And in terms of the linkage, you had your story to tell. Let me tell you one piece of information that is probably not well known. In the United States, maternal mortality figures dramatically fell the year after women got the right to be represented in the US Congress, because women could then make sure that there was adequate budget provision for maternal health. That's a proven fact if you look back into history of the last century. So that just shows how political empowerment, social development are so closely linked. And political empowerment, of course, means also economic empowerment, because it's only when women have the resources and are able to participate in the economy. So there is, I think, a very interesting link between what Minister Labidi started with and what has now been carried on through the presentations by you and Marianne, and also Mr. Benitez, and of course the Ukrainian ambassador, bringing a very interesting security perspective. We are, of course, very short of time because we need to get back into the formal discussion of the Assembly, but I would not be doing justice to our panelists and to Minister Labedi if I did not open the floor and ask whether any of you would like to contribute from your perspective. Many of your countries that are here are actually actively working in these areas with the partners, and some of you have, of course, had an opportunity to say what is happening in your countries. But let me give you an opportunity if anyone would like to ask a question to one of our panelists or would like to add to this discussion. Yes, Egypt.
Thank you, Mr. Director General, and thanks for convening this very interesting discussion on women empowerment. We agree with what was said by the speakers on the centrality of women empowerment and how this can have a synergetic multiplier effect on other sectors in the society, including economic and social. I was so much interested in what was mentioned by the EBRD. We know that the EBRD and the IDLO are very important partners to Egypt, not only when it comes to the legal issues, but also for economic empowerment. My comment is on the projects that are being chosen, and I believe that the two examples that were mentioned by the EBRD are very important, but one point that maybe could be interested to have a discussion on this, how you reach a decision to choose one project or not another. We know that IDLO and the EBRD, the financial resources are limited by nature, and you have to choose your project and your interventions according to priority and according to its impact. So it could be very important that you have a dialogue also with your partners in the receiving countries and in the government in particular, to choose which project can have the higher impact and could lead to real women empowerment. Thank you.
If there are any other questions or comments, we can take them all in one go. Yes, please. Honduras? Sorry, Italy. Yes.
Good morning, thank you. I work for the Human Rights Office of this minister, and I would like to focus the attention on some aspects related to gender-based violence and to our action to fight gender-based violence. Our approach is based on the assumption that there is a strong link between gender-based violence and empowerment of women. And we consider that they are two linked aspects and that should be considered together. Indeed, on the one hand, the fight against violence contributes to the empowerment of women. Indeed, we think that, we consider that if gender-based violence persists, it is not possible to achieve women's empowerment. At the same time, women empowerment that is based on the recognition of the importance of the important role, political, economical, and social important role of women, contribute to fight the phenomenon of violence. Another aspect to which we attach the utmost importance is the fight for the eradication of female genital mutilation, that are an abuse that still affects too many women in the world, and that poses serious threats to both to their physical and psychological health, and more generally bears negative consequences on the development of a society. And we think that our our action on the issue is based on a comprehensive approach that involve all the actors, all the relevant actors, and that takes into account the link between female genital mutilation, gender inequality, and violence, and gender-based violence. And we think that what is needed is integrated policy that foster the implementation of international commitments and foster a social change also through awareness-raising campaigns. Indeed, we think that national legislation that criminalize these practices are not enough and cannot be effective if there is an acceptance and a social support toward these practices. And I would like to highlight also the importance to prevent and combat gender-based violence during conflict and emergency situations. And Italy supports several initiatives to prevent violence in conflict. We joined the call to action on protection from gender-based violence that aims at mobilizing all the donor countries, the UN agency, the NGOs, and all the other humanitarian actors to protect women and girls in emergency and conflict. And moreover, as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council in the current year, we promoted the inclusion of specific provision in the resolution of the Security Council related to women, peace and security, in particular in those resolutions that deals with peacekeeping mission. And moreover, last September, we signed the voluntary compact. We provided a financial contribution to the UN Trust Funds in support of victims of sexual exploitation and abuse. And in general, Italy does not consider women just as victims of conflict, but also as important actors for peace that should be involved in all the cycle of peace, including mediation. And that is why the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation launched last October the Mediterranean Women Mediators Network. That is one of the flagship initiatives of our mandate in the Security Council, and that has been designed to have a long-term impact even after our mandate. To conclude, I would like to highlight the importance of education. Indeed, we think that the role of educators as well as of the role of media are essential both for the fight against violence and for the promotion of women's empowerment. And it is important to strengthen our effort in order to boost a real change in some society and to ban harmful practices that continues to be accepted because they are rooted in tradition. And we think that it is necessary to move according to a logic of dialogue, inclusiveness, and valorization of local ownership. Thank you.
I would like to thank the representative of Italy and invite, the European Commission. I couldn't see your, the European Commission to take the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam. I would like very briefly to share with you a few comments and information which are relevant to this debate. We're talking about peace and prosperity. Is it possible without gender equality? And of course, course, there are many things I could say about what the EU does in this area, but I would like just to go briefly to the most recent and most relevant for our debate information. In fact, gender equality is at the core of European values, is enshrined within the European Union legal and political framework. It is also identified in our most recent policy document, the European Consensus on Development, as a critical cross-cutting issue for development cooperation. So we have devoted a very specific attention to how to make it happen and how to surmount the gaps, which were very well illustrated. Just let me say for the economic aspect, if you look into OECD studies, you will find that if women had the same access to productive resources as men, for instance, they could increase yields on their farms by 20 to 30% and raise total agricultural output. And this would lift an estimated 100 or 150 million people out of hunger worldwide. And this is the dimension of the problem. If you, close the gap in the labor force, global economy would grow 26% worldwide, says McKinsey report. And this kind of big issues are with us, and we need to tackle. So we have, as European Union, a Gender Action Plan 2016-2020, which covers all the aspects which were mentioned, going from education, health, empowerment, political participation, participation on decision-making bodies, and so on and so forth. But I would like to put forward now the latest of our initiative, which has to do with violence against women. It is called the Spotlight Initiative, and because we want to put spotlight on this problem, and it is implemented together with the UN. It was launched indeed in latest UNGA in September this year. And it will be implemented through a trust fund managed by the UN, which we endowed with 500 million euros, and it is open to other donors, of course. We would like, as I've heard, that IDLO has a memorandum of understanding with UN Women to highlight the fact that this is one of the UN agencies which will implement it, so I encourage you to explore how to work together. And without insisting too much on the details, I'll just say it is organized around regional actions, and then more specifically some countries will be identified, and it wants to tackle the form of violence prevailing in those regions as a starting point at least. So it will focus in some cases on sexual and gender-based violence and harmful practices. In other cases, it will be domestic and family violence, and so on and so forth. But I just wanted to share with you this most recent initiative so we can develop it later, maybe. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank the representative of the European Commission and note that the Spotlight initiative comes at a time. We are in the 16 days of activism between the day to mark the elimination of violence against women and International Human Rights Day. So a strong message that until we eliminate violence against women, we will not have full enjoyment of human rights. I have three more speakers. May I invite the Ambassador of Mozambique?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank the panelists, especially the Minister for Tunisia, for all the information that she gave us and the progress on this issue of gender. My question first is for IDLO, just to ask where you are helping the countries to draft the laws and legislations on gender. What is the impact for the real people that, I'm talking about the women. Because sometimes we have laws And the women, they don't have that information on those laws. They don't know their rights because the laws are there, they're drafted and they're there. And, but people that they're supposed to have information, they don't have that information. And what IDLO does after that. Also, because definitely we had the indicators of some regions, but we didn't hear anything about Africa, because some of our countries, some of our regions, they're doing well on this issue of empowerment of women, although there is a lot of debate on the issue of quota, issue of targets, issue of parity, because sometimes you see in some of our parliaments, you see numbers, but you ask yourself if these women that are there, they really take the decisions or no, they are part of the decision that are taken there, because sometimes it's just a number, but the people that they take a decision, those women they're not part of that. I was very happy to hear about the issue of education for girls, because definitely I think the problem that we're having in our continent is an issue of dropout. We have girls that they go to the primary school and they finish the school, but when they go to secondary school and they start dropping up. Because of poverty, parents, they prefer to give priority to the boys to go to school, to continue to go to school, and the girl, they get married, premature pregnancy and whatever. So I was very happy to hear about this issue for girls. Also the issue of HIV, that is a problem, and normally it affects women. But I really wanted to hear from IDLO what is your impact of the work that you're doing in the terrain after the laws that are drafted up. Thank you.
I thank the Ambassador of Mozambique, and the next speaker is the representative of Sweden.
Thanks. I think this discussion is very interesting and important, and I just want to highlight a few issues. As was mentioned yesterday, in Sweden we have been working a long time in the area of gender equality and women's human rights. In 2014, the Swedish government took this a step further and proclaimed the feminist foreign policy, which my colleague was mentioning yesterday. And an action plan was finalized 2015, and it contains 6 thematic goals. It's the women's human rights, freedom from all forms of violence, women's participation in conflict prevention and peace processes, women's political participation, and women's economic rights, and women's sexual and reproductive health rights. And obviously development cooperation is one way of implementing this policy. Just to touch upon the heading of this session, yes, there is a strong relation between gender equality and peace. And women, peace and security is a prioritized agenda for Sweden, and our view and message is that the precondition to reach a sustainable peace improves if women are part of the peace process, which we also heard our Italian colleague mentioning. But while the evidence base for this argument by some researchers are assessed as maybe not sufficiently strong, the link between a masculine ideology of honor and the likeliness to take to violence, including political violence, is more convincing. And we had a very interesting debate within SIDA some few weeks ago with researchers around these topics. But what is clear is that we need to work on attitudes, values, culture, and behaviors, both with male and female citizens and male and female decision makers, if we are to identify actors of change. And I think this has been very much emphasized today, and also with by our guest this morning, that attitude and values, yes, we need to be better to work on that. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Sweden, and next on my list is Mongolia.
Thank you. I would like to brief the delegates about the work IDLO is doing on tackling the GBV issue in Mongolia. Gender-based violence, and especially violence against women, was and is a serious problem in our country. The government of Mongolia, in cooperation with IDLO, is addressing this problem in a very proactive way. IDLO's project in Mongolia is quite complex and challenging, since it includes multiple stakeholders, such as police, prosecutors, judges, bailiffs, and law enforcement university. And the project aims to ensure their coordinated response to GBV. Within the last 2 years, we achieved tangible results. The project activities enabled the formation of the Specialized Division for Prevention of GBV at the National Police Agency of Mongolia. Prosecutors trained by IDLO were entitled to work specifically on GBV issues, on GBV cases. Courts initiated to pilot judges to specialize on family and GBV cases. And bailiffs trained by IDLO drafted sub-legislation and carrying out obligatory training for inmates. Law Enforcement University has introduced GBV course in the curricula and going to introduce legal clinics with the help of the project in 2018. Before the launch of the project, law enforcement officers and judiciary were trained by NGOs. IDLO project conducted training of trainers, and 33 police, prosecutors, judges, bailiffs trainers were trained, who in their turn taught to more than 500 colleague officers from capital city Ulaanbaatar and 8 provinces during 2016 and 2017. The IDLO trainers elaborated their first ever integrated handbook against GBV for the above named 4 professionals. And we also use different platforms to create a network of our trainees to keep in touch with them. For example, we created a Facebook group on training participants and using it to disseminate further information to them and get feedback from the trainees on progress being made towards the coordinated response to GBV cases. GBV response is complicated by the fact that Mongolia is a vast country of 1.5 million square kilometers, and it is most difficult to tackle GBV issue in remote areas of Mongolia. The IDLO project is aiming to reach law enforcement and judiciary working in rural areas, especially at the smallest administrative units of Mongolia called SOMs. So this is briefly about the current project, and the work against GBV will be expanded in 2018. Thank you for your...
Thank you very much. I think that brings our discussion, in the interest of time, we need to wrap it up, although I know there is a huge amount of interest, which I think is indicative of the seriousness of the issues that have been raised. I know that there was a question addressed to EBRD, which you may want to, if you can respond very briefly to it.
Thank you very much. Yes, just on the question from Egypt on how we select our projects, just sort of bearing in mind that the overall impact of what we do is sort of focusing on the business environment, and we of course believe that increased participation of women does have impact, and therefore also impact on economic development. So there's 4 things that we look at. First, we look at where we have gaps in a country, and where we can have impact. We look at the expertise that we have to support sort of filling that particular gap. We also have to make sure that we have funding available to support the project we're doing. But most importantly, all our projects, all our technical assistance is supported by our client governments. So we will not do any project until we have formal request from our client government. So we always have our discussions with relevant stakeholders in country, and then a request to pursue the project. So we have very deep engagement, and of course would not do anything that is not considered to be a priority in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the clarification. I know that there is a lot of interest in this issue, and I hope that in the break and later you will feel free to approach the panelists and to take this discussion further. But allow me to conclude this panel by asking the Minister, Her Excellency Minister Labidi, to very briefly, in 2 minutes, give us some inspiration to continue this extremely important work of gender equality in the interest of peace and development.
Merci beaucoup. Enfin, j'ai écouté avec beaucoup d'attention et d'intérêt le débat. Je trouve que nous œuvrons tous vers la même préoccupation qui est l'instauration de l'égalité et de l'équité de chance entre les hommes et les femmes. D'une part, l'échange d'expériences qui était très enrichissant, et également parler de l'importance de la paix et de la sécurité et de la stabilité dans un monde en mouvance, et également où il y a beaucoup de problèmes qui touchent aussi bien les femmes, les enfants et les personnes âgées. Il y a également une volonté de la part des gouvernements et du système d'une façon générale, comme l'IDLO, comme l'Union européenne, les différents partenaires qui sont là pour appuyer les gouvernements et la société civile pour aller de l'avant, pour instaurer un esprit, pour instaurer la paix, la sécurité, l'égalité et le respect des droits humains de chacun de nous. Et donc ce débat est très important, et je suis tout à fait optimiste pour voir que dans les années, qu'en 2030, j'espère que le monde va atteindre ses objectifs. Malheureusement, en 2015, les objectifs n'étaient pas atteints, mais on a connu des bouleversements avant déjà 2015. Mais je reste, et nous restons, persuadés qu'avec cette grande volonté qui nous réunit aujourd'hui, nous sommes capables de relever tous les défis. Restons unis, restons ensemble pour bâtir un monde et un devenir meilleur. Juste, je voulais rajouter que la loi intégrale que la Tunisie a promulguée est traduite vers le français et l'anglais, et surtout en braille, pour permettre au maximum de gens de profiter de cette loi. Bien sûr, je souhaite plein de succès pour nos travaux et aussi pour cette assemblée 36e assemblée. Plein de succès. Merci, Madame la Directrice Générale. Merci à vous tous et toutes. Merci.
Merci à vous. This brings us to the close of the Partnership Forum. I would like to thank all the panelists and all of you for participating so well on it, and pass the floor now back to the President.
Before going to the break, I know it's a coffee break due, however, I need to kindly remind our delegates that we will resume the assembly business starting from now and after the break, and we kindly request them to stay to maintain the quorum. Just one item before going to the break, we will bring forward the report of the Board of Advisors. In the interest of our colleague, the chair of the Board of Advisors, he have a plane to catch, so we brought forward his item. And the floor is yours, Professor Macau.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I hate to cut into this very informative and seductive session that just took place. Very enjoyable, and I want to congratulate the speakers for a very enlightening conversation. I'm privileged to present the report of the Board of Advisors for this year. I'm the chair of the board, and I'm presenting the report on behalf of the entire board. You have the report in your packages, and so I will not read it. Nevertheless, I would like to highlight just a few items, a couple of items, for the benefit of everyone. The board is composed, as you know, you've elected the board, is composed of very distinguished individuals in the areas of law, development, and diplomacy. Board members have a long-standing experience and devotion to the values that IDLO stands for. Pursuant to the reforms that were undertaken of IDLO's governing documents, we were able to clarify the role of the board, and in particular, I just want to emphasize that the board now is seized fully of an advisory mandate on matters of substance and strategic vision for the organization, working closely with the other governance bodies, the Standing Committee, and of course the Assembly, to give advice and on the work that we do. To that effect, I just want to mention that the board decided to reorganize itself so that it can better deliver on the promise given to it by this body. We decided to reconstitute the board into 4 subcommittees, each headed by a board member. These subcommittees intend to work closely with the Director General and the senior staff at IDLO to provide advice and support on the mission of the organization. Just briefly, let me just mention the subcommittees for your benefit. We have a subcommittee on governance, which is chaired by Dr. Hanno Scheuch, who is here. To my left, Hanno, if you can raise your hand so that people can see you, that would be great. And I just want to mention that Dr. Scheuch was instrumental in helping the board put together a comprehensive review of the governance documents for the benefit of the open-ended working group on governance reform. Dr. Scheuch, worked extensively with Professor Carletti, who is the Italian member on the board, to make those proposals which were adopted by the board and then discussed at the open-ended working group and adopted later by the Standing Committee. So I just want to say the board was instrumental in reviewing the documents and making proposals for that document. We also have a subcommittee on programs, because after all, IDLO is an organization that is driven by programs, and this subcommittee on programs is chaired by Mr. Rowland, who is from Australia. This subcommittee has already worked out modus operandi with our DG, and it's already up and running. And then we have a subcommittee on research and scholarship. We say that we are thought leaders, and we thought that it would be important for the board to undertake a subcommittee in which it would help the organization conceive and formulate its role as a thought leader in the area of the rule of law. This subcommittee is chaired by Professor Kameri Mbote, who is from Kenya. The last committee is a subcommittee on external relations. And this committee, seeks to understand IDLO's relationships with external actors. And this committee is chaired by Ambassador Apakan, whom I succeeded as the chair of the board. I should say that the board is in the process of working with the DG, through consultations on the way in which these subcommittees are going to intersect with the various organs of IDLO. And so we look forward to working with the DG, but also talking to the subcommittee, to the standing committee on our work. I just, want to mention that in June, the board met here in Rome. The full board met. We are 10 members. And in our meeting, we were able to obviously do internal housekeeping matters, but also we received reports from the DG on IDLO's programs and management plan and the visions of the organization going forward on both thematic and geographic areas, including IDLO's gender strategy. So I don't want to take your time. I just wanted to highlight those few points. I would be remiss if at the end of this discussion I do not express the board's gratitude to you, Mr. President, for your term as president for the last several years. The board feels that we worked very closely with you, and we look forward, obviously, to working with you in the future. So I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Macau. And thanks to our Board of Advisors for their invaluable support to the organizations. Now we break for 20 minutes, then we will resume the Assembly of Party. Thank you.